The New Adventures of He-Man was a 1990 animated series that was intended to follow on from the 80s Masters of the Universe cartoon, with an accompanying toy line to go alongside the show. Unlike its predecessor, which combined sword and sorcery alongside science fiction, The New Adventures was almost purely a science fiction based show, and was set in a more futuristic time period than the original, although it still contained a number of continuity nods from the 80s series. So, was this new show successful? Well, not really. The effort to keep He-Man going throughout the 90s was one that didn't last long, and the show only lasted one season of 65 episodes, only half as many as the original cartoon. And just to reflect even further on what this show did for the He-Man brand, it would take another 12 years for there to be another cartoon version of the franchise. For this reason, The New Adventures of He-Man is considered to be the black sheep of the Masters of the Universe franchise. But is this 90s incarnation of He-Man really that bad? Well, let's take a look. In the distant future, the planet Primus is a peaceful society unused to the ways of war. A settlement of humans live peacefully behind a protective barrier that surrounds their entire planet, until a society of evil mutants led by Flog come by to try and shoot down the shield and lay siege to planet Primus. The planet's leaders, led by Master Sebien, get the idea that a hero from the past could help them in the future. So, two of the good guys, Captain Hydron and Flipshot, who both look like characters from the Centurions cartoon and toy line, volunteer to go back in time to find this mythical hero and bring him back to Primus. Unfortunately, whilst these two lads are possibly the bravest members of the Galactic Guardians, they are also probably the most stupid. Back in the land before science fiction, they are kidnapped by Skeletor and fall victim to his deception and actually think that he's the good guy. I mean, look at him. Just bloody look at him. How clueless are these two? After Prince Adam learns about the time travellers from the Sorceress of Grayskull, he reluctantly agrees to help them. To explain his lengthy absence, Adam actually transforms into He-Man in front of his parents, and finally reveals to them his great secret. Although Queen Marlena now has blue hair for some reason. When He-Man goes to stop Skeletor, it turns out that because Hydron and Flipshot aren't very bright, they don't know which one is good and which one is evil. Seriously, are you telling me that Hydron and Flipshot can't tell who the good guy is here? This, funnily enough, would actually end up becoming a running theme throughout the series, where Skeletor would present himself as the good guy and painted He-Man as the villain. And people kept falling for it, much to He-Man's annoyance. Look at his face. Just look at his face. He's like, seriously, again? In comparison to this, the idea of Skeletor even pretending to be nice in the Filmation series or in the 2000X series is something that would absolutely disgust our favourite boneheaded villain. So, Hydron and Flipshot decide to bring both He-Man and Skeletor back to the future. Yes, pun fully intended. He-Man joins the rest of the Galactic Guardians to help protect Primus, which is hinted upon that it is in fact Eternia in the future. Meanwhile, Skeletor quickly joins forces with Flog and his band of evil mutants. The New Adventures of He-Man was launched with 4 pack-in mini-comics explaining the setup changes, including the dramatic change in appearance of He-Man and Skeletor, and the change of He-Man's by the power of Grayskull to now being by the power of Eternia. The mini-comics showed a slightly different story. When Prince Adam and Skeletor travel to Primus, Adam becomes He-Man in front of Skeletor, revealing his secret identity and giving up the identity of Prince Adam to remain permanently as He-Man. As he was in close proximity to Adam during the transformation, Skeletor is caught up in the explosion from the transformation and is left severely injured, to the point where he has to become a cybernetic being in order to survive. In the TV series, these setup changes were ignored entirely, and the two main characters appear from the beginning in Eternia in their high-tech costumes, with absolutely no explanation for the changes. As for other characters from the classic Filmation series, well, there aren't any. We see Skeletor and we see Snake Mountain briefly, but there's no appearance from any of his other minions. Who are these guys with the goat horns? Where's Beastman, Evil Lyn, Trackjaw, etc.? The sorceress does appear regularly, communicating telepathically with He-Man, although she too looks nothing like her Filmation version either. Teela does briefly travel to the future later on for a one-off guest appearance in the show, in the episode Once Upon a Time. But her hair is changed dramatically in length and in colour from red to blonde. Although in the early mini-comics of the original toy line she was portrayed as having long blonde hair, she certainly wasn't dressed all in pink like this. This was despite the fact that this series was supposed to be a direct continuation of the original He-Man series.
Just like the good old days.
So, on to the new characters then, the Galactic Guardians and the Mutants. In time-honoured He-Man tradition, they are mostly named after their powers or abilities, which would explain why Captain Hydron is constantly dressed up like he's about to go scuba diving, and why Optics is basically a massive eyeball encased in a suit of armour. Flog begins the series as a ruthless leader determined to destroy the human race, but he soon becomes easily manipulated by Skeletor, who often refers to Flog as Floggy. Skeletor is essentially the Starscream to Flog's Megatron at the start, where he secretly plans to overthrow him. But he later drops this idea as time goes on. But by the end of the series, Flog has grown tired of the endless battles and Skeletor schemes and constantly losing, and he refuses to listen to Skeletor anymore. When his final invasion attempt fails, he agrees to sign a peace treaty, and seems to be relieved that the war is over, although what they were fighting over in the first place doesn't really get explained.
To tell you the truth, I don't even remember why our fighting started.
Critter is instantly smitten with Skeletor when he arrives in the future. Skeletor and Critter nearly have a passionate embrace in the Seeds of Resistance before Flog pulls them apart. Skeletor also seems to have a soft spot for Slushhead, as he usually holds Flog back from physically attacking him during any time that Flog gets angry with having to deal with Slushhead's incompetence. He even shows a caring side when he gets a mutant dog, called Grrr. The unfortunately named Butthead is essentially a very similar character to Ram-Man from the original series, but now he's as one of the villains. In the cartoon, Butthead is referred to as BH, which is probably for the best, let's be honest. Oh, and there was also another character called Karate. And the thing is with Karate is that he was an excellent hand-to-hand combatant, to the point where there was a number of times where he even had He-Man on the ropes. The problem is that Karate was voiced by a white actor trying to do a Japanese accent. Oh dear.
No, stand still, you coward! Let's see how well you fight using my weapon. Hands!
And he's not the only character to get saddled with a terrible name. What about this guy, Spinwit? What kind of name is Spinwit? Poor guy. Master Sebien serves as He-Man's mentor and guide, sort of like his Obi-Wan. The Sorceress also continues in this role, as she did in the original series. Sebien is implied to be centuries old and is hinted to be far more powerful than he appears. Unfortunately, he is also one of those characters that keep banging on about the power of the good and the way of the magic constantly. I mean, if you were doing a drinking game for the new adventures, for goodness sake don't take a shot every time someone says the power of the good and the way of the magic. After the first 5 episodes you'll be in danger of alcoholic poisoning.
Thus, with the power of the good and the way of the magic.
There was the power of the good and the way of the magic. Find the power of the good and the way of the magic.
Seeking the power of the good and the way of the magic.
You brought 2 with you. One the good and the other the magic.
Only one has the good and the magic.
You have the power of the good and the way of the magic.
These hands have the power of the good. Behold, the power of the good.
Way of the magic, show me the way.
The power of the good and the way of the magic.
I will let the way of the magic and the power of the good be my guide.
The way of the magic will be my co-pilot.
The power of the good, the way of the magic.
Feel the power of the good, mutants!
Master Sebien may look harmless, but he has great magical powers, and his staff isn't just for show. Perhaps his most badass moment comes when he takes on Skeletor's evil clones of the Inner Council single-handedly, displaying considerable fighting skill and deflecting their laser blasts with his staff. Oh, blimey. I suppose I'm going to have to talk about the Scientists of Primus now. So imagine Orko from the Filmation series, only times that by 4, and they don't actually help to save the day. They are insufferable to a massive degree, both to the other characters and to the fan base. Even Skeletor can barely stand putting up with their shit for more than 5 minutes.
It gives me great pleasure to present the time vessel, invented by myself, which I humbly have named the Alcon 1.
He's joking, of course, since we all know it was Cracks, who invented the Clyzemic beamoids. They're the heart of the vessel.
Just 2 morns ago, they were begging me, please, oh please, Gebel, you've got to help us with the time vessel. You're the only one who can invent it, Gebel.
Now, of course, they're trying to take all the credit. Next thing you know, Meldoc will be saying he invented it.
What? Oh, you all know perfectly well that I...
No,
Oh, will you shut up? Unfortunately, these 4 characters usually get a lot of screen time, as a lot of the episodes usually involve the good guys fixing something that the scientists manage to muck up, or the scientists get kidnapped by the mutants and need to be rescued. The scientists begin the show as a group of 4, but later episodes mostly just use 2 of them as a double act, so maybe even the writers have begun to realise just how annoying these characters had become. They don't even look like they belong in this cartoon. The 4 of them look like reject designs for Dr. Snuggles. Most of the episodes usually end with all the goodies having a right good chuckle as we fade to black. Although, like in the Filmation original, each episode has a life lesson right at the end before the end credits roll. These do seem to be a little more forced than the ones in the Filmation series though. Whilst in the 80s series we would get a life lesson based on what happened in today's episode, the ones here are more like store dirty cloths in a safe place, or volunteer at your local Red Cross. Important lessons for sure, but these just feel tagged on at the end rather than being a continuation of that episode. Some of the other endings are a little weak, like when He-Man defeated Skeletor by, getting his staff wet? Meanwhile, the rest of the mutants are defeated by essentially getting tarred and feathered. Since when did an episode of He-Man turn into Home Alone? And at the end of the 5th episode, again, bear in mind that the first 5 episodes were edited together as a movie for the first broadcast, He-Man somehow manages to survive an asteroid field, getting trapped in the vacuum of space without a ship, and yet made it back to Primus and made an elaborate entrance from within inside a broken statue on a fountain. How? Just how the hell did he do that? Unusually, for the time, the series actually has a final episode which acts as a conclusion to the storyline that began in the first episode. As this series was intended to be a continuation of the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon, it could also be seen as a grand finale to that show as well. So, for answering the question in my first He-Man related video over how did this classic series end, you could say that it ends here. Although Skeletor is defeated and exiled into space in the finale, he is last seen declaring that he will be back. You know what, Skeletor should really stop saying that, as he did the exact same thing at the end of the live-action 1987 film. On both of these occasions, neither of these versions of Skeletor were ever seen again. A second season was planned with the idea that it would have featured He-Man's return to Eternia, but this never happened. Ultimately, although we got great animation and good continuity, the show seriously lacked decent storylines. It was pretty generic and forgettable. The new characters were pretty bland and forgettable, and if they weren't bland and forgettable then they were just bloody annoying. And the new designs for He-Man and Skeletor were pretty horrible and were disliked by the fans. For fans of the original show, there was very little here that had carried over from what they loved about Masters of the Universe, and there wasn't really much here for newcomers either. Among fans, it's not really up for debate which series was better. The original wins, hands down. Part of this could have to do with the fact that Filmation closed its doors before the series was produced. Jet Lag Productions were tapped with a dubious task of creating this new show. After watching a number of episodes available on YouTube, I have to say I do have many mixed feelings, but they still did a decent job, just not as well as what Filmation did. In the end, The New Adventures of He-Man was equal parts success and failure, in my opinion. The concept and tone were far too different to really be compared with Masters of the Universe, and it really at times was too silly for its own good. The New Adventures of He-Man is considered by many to be the black sheep of the He-Man family. Its lack of relevance to Masters of the Universe and drastically different tone hammered a spike right down the middle of the audience, which is where I found myself. I liked roughly half of the episodes here and just couldn't get into the other. Whether or not you'll enjoy The New Adventures of He-Man really depends on your passion towards the He-Man franchise. If you are curious about watching the show, then you might want to check out a few of the episodes that are available on YouTube before you start plonking down some money to buy the DVDs. Just to give you a final example of how much this animated series isn't particularly viewed upon with fondness, during the 2014 comic book series, He-Man The Eternity War, Hordak actually destroys the planet Primus entirely, effectively purging the New Adventures from that particular timeline. We even get a glimpse of Master Sebien and other characters from New Adventures before this happens, which says it all, really. Anyway, that is the end of another little analysis / rant on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Thank you to everyone that has taken the time to watch this video. If you have enjoyed this, then please take the time to leave a like and a comment on this video. Please also consider sharing this video across your social media, in particular with anything related to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And why not subscribe to the channel as well in order to see my other videos. But for now, thank you very much for stopping by the Big Daddy D Reviews channel, and I'll catch you again next time.